ripple effect was real, and we're starting to feel it. With the passage of AB5, there's been a ripple effect across the country. A lot of guys have just thrown up their hands and said, we're not doing it. And they don't go to California anymore. A lot of businesses are changing the way they do things, and it really has screwed up the industry on the West Coast. But what is it? How did it start? You know, we all know most of the story, but how is it screwing things up? And the unintended consequences that are coming. I'm starting to see the result of some of those unintended consequences, and they're going to get ugly. So what is AB5? Well, to put it bluntly, it's a bill that prohibits contract drivers. If you're going to hire somebody, lease them on and all that, and call them independent contractor, they can't have one customer, you. Let me see if I can figure out a better way to put it. It's basically stating that you're not allowed to use owner-operators within the state of California unless you classify them as employees. There's a 3-tier system, and what's stupid is there's a lot of exemptions. Trucking is not one of them, and ironically, Uber and Lyft is. But it's basically saying that if you're going to have owner-operators and lease drivers driving under your authority, you have to classify them as employees. There's a set of parameters to get around that, but the 3-tier system to judge whether they're legal or not and avoid misclassification is very narrow. And it doesn't seem that bad, but it's very hard to prove. These are the 3 requirements. The worker is free from the control and direction of the hiring organization in connection with the performance of the work. The worker performs the work that is outside the hiring entity's business. The worker is routinely doing work in an independent, established trade, occupation, or business that's the same as the work being done. Now, one of the common misconceptions that people have concerning AB5 is that as a lease driver or an owner-operator leased onto a specific company, they can't go to California. You can. However, the rules do apply when picking up. So you can go to California. It does not prohibit any loads coming into California at all. That's in the rules. I've read it. You can look it up. But picking up in California, that's when it does apply, because you're doing business in the state. So what's happening is a lot of these guys are taking loads out to California, and then they're just deadheading out. Well, they're not taking the freight out of California, and it's causing a ripple effect. I'll get to that in a minute. Part of why this law was passed was basically to come out after Uber and Lyft and ride-sharing programs. It killed the taxi cab unions, which are big out there. Don't get me wrong, they're big. There's a lot of money to be made. But taxi cabs they just gouge people. That's not even a joke. Take a cab in Vegas. I tried to take one from basically the Petro there at exit 46 down to the Strip, 6-7 miles. It cost me almost $80 because they had to pay for every zone they went through, and then they basically had to pay a toll. It was the biggest racket I ever saw. You go to Vegas, get a lift, trust me. But the taxi cab unions and all that, they were putting the taxi cabs out of business. So instead of creating a better product and doing a better job, they sought to politically destroy their competition, because after all, they are the union. And when the union forced the mobsters out, the government stepped in and became bigger mobsters. But politics aside, so they went after that. And the irony of it is they voted and passed a law exempting ride-sharing programs now. So the people they went after got away. But the unintended consequences have just decimated the independent contractors and all that. Well, they went through after this and did a whole bunch of exemptions, and trucking's never been one. And it should be, but neither here nor there. So they took it all and took it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court refused to hear it. Now, the reason the Supreme Court refused to hear it was very simple. This is a state issue involving state labor. It does not prohibit anything outside their borders. There's no conflict with any states. So basically, legally, the Supreme Court, even if they believed this was fundamentally wrong, due to the fact that it was passed by state government, there's an order. They could not intervene. Constitutionally, they can't. So, because it's a state issue involving state labor and state law, they opted out. I know that Supreme Courts have meddled in states' business before, and if you ever read the Constitution or you read the way the laws are set up, the states are supposed to have power over the federal government. And whether that happens or not, let's not get political here. I hate talking about this stuff on video. But all that aside, that was why the Supreme Court decided not to hear it, because it's a state issue. So now we're stuck with what we have, the ripple effect. So the first wave started with them going after companies like FedEx. Now, I kind of get it. FedEx was hiring people on 1099 as lease operators and whatnot, and then making them, they were company, they identified as company employees, they did everything, but they weren't being paid. So what they were doing, I get that. But, in my book here, I am very clearly a contract employee. I have one customer. For a price, I use their numbers, I use their fuel cards, I do it because it doesn't make sense for me to do it any other way. Someday it may. But there is no, they do not call me an employee. I am an independent contractor, first and last. But I am employed, my services are employed by the company. Now remember that, because semantics is very important in things of this nature. That's what gets a lot of people in trouble. You mispronounce or you say one thing out of order, and it throws the meaning off of everything. And lawyers love things like that. So, I'm being paid a percentage that's set and agreed upon. I'm a contractor. So they went after FedEx, and FedEx took the pendulum and kicked it the other way as hard as they could. Suddenly, if you're going to be an independent contractor you have to have your own company name. You have to have your own DOT numbers. You have to have all your own stuff. And yet you still only have one customer. I have not understood what keeps a driver there. But, so if you look at a lot of these FedEx trucks now, and Amazon now too, especially their delivery trucks, you notice that there's always a separate name on the door, or down in a corner, or, truck owned and operated by, or this, that, and the other thing. So that's what happened there. Instead of making these people employees, they forced them to spend more money, and if they wanted to keep their job, they had to get all their own stuff. Did their pay go up? I don't know. I don't work for FedEx. Truthfully, as an independent contractor, I hope so, because all of that stuff costs a lot of money. So as of July 2022, when it was kicked back and a lot of the court cases were either thrown out or settled or dismissed, we've been seeing a change. And what you're starting to see now is something that really does disturb me, and it's an unintended consequence of what's going on, because the ripple effect is screwing the matrix up for the rest of the country. It really is. And so what you're starting to see now is a lot of these companies that lease trucks to drivers are getting ready to create a whole new world for these lease drivers. So I was sitting there talking to a friend of mine who has a family member that drives for a large mega carrier out of Springfield, Missouri. I'll give you a minute. Yeah. And they're getting ready to redo their whole lease program. So far now, after July, no lease trucks are, they're not hiring any owner-operators out of California, and I don't think they're sending any lease trucks out there. But what they're doing now is kind of like FedEx. I had to get down closer to the camera. And this is the part that scares me, and this is why I hate lease companies, because they're going to take a bad situation and make it worse. And so what they're saying is they want these lease drivers now, and this is from what I've heard so far. They want these lease drivers. They're not going to be able to lease through the company anymore. It'll be a third-party lease, and they're going to need to get their own DOT numbers, and they're going to need to get their own, just their own, all their own stuff, permits, tags, the whole ordeal, their own numbers, and I'm sure the company will help them at a cost. And my question was, if they're going to go that far with a new guy, how are they going to keep him at the company? Because a guy's going to, people in this business, especially when they're cut on their own and they really do have control over what they're doing, or they think they have control over what they're doing, these people don't stay stupid forever. Okay, I know a couple of guys that I think are going to stay stupid forever. 4, 5, but most of the guys are going to start realizing, wait a minute, I've got my numbers, I've got my business, I'm figuring out how to do this, they're not helping me at all, what's keeping me here? Now, there's one loophole that I'd have to discover. I have to talk to a lawyer about this, but there is one loophole I discovered in AB5, and that was the very last thing when it says, you can't restrict working between multiple carriers doing the same work. So basically, what these companies are going to do is form 2 companies, and they're going to work between the other and create a load board to where these guys can pick and choose their own loads, to where they, but it's all going to be controlled by the same entity or the same parent company. I see something like that happening, and that right there should scare everybody, because all they're going to do is gouge these guys more. They're going to go broke faster, and they're going to realize that, hey, I could have been doing this without these clowns the whole time. People don't stay stupid forever. The ripple effect that I'm seeing right now in my own personal journey here at this company, which I really do like. These guys have been great. Freight's been getting tough, and a lot of the freight is changing. And I had a thought why, and this is what got me on, and I need to figure this one out, is because literally half of our drivers here are owner-operators. Between a third and a half. Guys come here that pays good, they get a trailer to pull, and it's no BS. They treat us like adults. I go to work, make a check call once a day. If I don't have anything to do, I don't even have to make a check call. I go home, I tell them when I'm coming back out. That sounds like an owner operator to me, but that aside, we have so many owner operators, and a lot of them run west. Well, when they can no longer run west, the guys aren't going to deadhead 200-300 miles out of California for produce. They're not going to do it. They might deadhead to Yuma if they're in the LA area or something like that, but it's not the only way I could see that happening is if a guy delivers and we have a local driver that goes out there and loads all this stuff. I know some of that happens someplace, and guys can just drop and hook and take off again. I don't know if that's covered under AB5 or not. I'd have to look. due to the fact that he didn't do any of the actual work. He just grabbed a trailer and left. I'm sure that's a gray area that will be exploited greatly until someone either confirms or stops it. But that aside, I've noticed that a lot of my usual freight that I was running out is it's not coming as usual as it used to. Is it because there's less freight, or is it because there's more drivers? And I've noticed out here especially, there's a lot more things are getting a whole lot more competitive. Driving out here on 40, I'm out here in Amarillo right now. I've noticed there's a lot of California trucks, but I'm not seeing a whole lot of anything else. So that kind of, there's a disproportionate amount of trucks. More than usual. Like I said, I've been doing this a long time, and I've never seen this many specific trucks. But all that aside, the ripple effect is starting to hurt freight across the rest of the country, because these drivers just aren't going there anymore. They're going elsewhere. And with that happening, it takes freight away from the people that have been here the whole time. I've talked about this before. There's just bottom feeders everywhere, and if they're not running the freight out to California and they're not running the cheap freight back out, they're grabbing the freight for nothing here in the Midwest and really just wrecking it for everybody else. Not that they weren't doing it already, but now it's escalated. Is this happening? It sure seems like it. But I can't, all of what I'm saying here is speculation, except the AB5 stuff. I actually did look all this stuff up. There are ways around it, but they're very specific ways, and unless you have a vested interest in California, I don't know what to tell you. Truthfully, I used to really love going out there. Aside from some of the obvious things, 20 years ago, it was a wonderful place to be. Hell, I'm from Los Angeles County. That's where I was born. And as much as everybody dogs it today, it was worse back in the 70s when you couldn't see across the street because the smog was that bad. I understand why they have clean air laws out there and whatnot. You had to, but it wasn't the trucks doing it. It was the locals. And it's amazing that all the locals cause all the chaos, and everybody from outside ends up paying for it. So where do we go from here? I can't tell you. I guess we'll just have to watch and learn, and we're going to have to learn how to adjust. So that's the ripple effect. It's really just screwing things up all the way across the board. But it's worth knowing about. So I appreciate it. Thanks for watching. See you next video.